So I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on how I like to bead feathers. Today I'm going to be demonstrating on a goose feather because I don't have any more eagle feathers, but this process applies to pretty much any circular project. So you can also apply this if you are doing beading around a lighter or any other cylindrical thing. It will also work the same. So before I get into the steps, I'm gonna just quickly go over all of the supplies that you need for this project. So I'm going to be using a mixture of beading needles and leather needles. And the beading needles that I'm using are these pony sewing needles for beading. They are size 10. I am also going to be using these Glover needles from John James, and they are size 6. You'll also need a little piece of leather. I have a larger piece here, but we're going to cut it and it's going to be quite small. On here I have my foam mat. This is called a beading mat. I get them at Bedazzle in Surrey. This is the thread that I'm going to be using. It is called Fireline. It's basically fishing thread. I really like it because it's very strong, and I also get this at Bedazzle in Surrey, but you can buy it at other places like Canadian Tire. I like to have a small spoon on hand to scoop my beads, a lighter for singeing my thread, small sharp needles for cutting my thread, and a small pair of round nose pliers for rebending my needle back into shape and for helping me pull my needle through the beads and leather if I have to. I'm also going to be using these beads from John Bead. They're called Cylin beads, I believe is how you pronounce them. They're cylindrical beads, and I'll do a closer up shot of them in a moment. You can also use seed beads, delica beads, Toho round beads for this project. Any beads that are the same size will work really good, and you can get really crazy with the colors and the patterns. But these are the ones that I'm going to be demonstrating with. So as you can see, these are kind of what they look like. They're these small cylindrical beads. These two specific colors I got gifted to me by John Bead. So thank you, John Bead, for that. These colors I purchased from Bedazzle in Surrey, but a few different bead stores sell them now. And lastly, you're going to need your feather. So I'm going to be using this goose feather that I found at a park nearby and cleaned up. I have also done this project on eagle feathers like this one. Ideally, for the feather that you're beading, the stem part should be long. It will make it easier for you. If it's a really short stem, it will be harder to bead. So the first step is going to be to thread your needle. As I mentioned before, I am using the Fireline, and I'm going to be using my Glover needle to begin with, my leather needle. Instead of tying both of the ends of my thread together, I'm going to leave one shorter, and I'm only going to tie my knots on the longer end of the thread. I'm going to tie about 4 knots on top of each other. Just like that. Now that I've threaded my needle, I'm going to measure the stem of this feather out onto the leather so that we can wrap it with the leather and stitch it together. So to begin, I'm just kind of laying my feather down on the leather. I'm going to lay it on the part that I want to have the beading on, so I'm not going to get these little plume feathers in the beaded part. So I'm going to make sure that the leather is just below them, and I'm going to kind of wrap the leather around just to see how much leather I would need to cut off to wrap it completely. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut that. I'm just going to give it a little snip just to mark the spot, and now I'm going to cut it. I'm going to see how long I need it to be, and I'll mark that as well. And after you cut the leather, as long as you cut it a little bit bigger than what you need, you could always trim it as you go. Now I'm just going to put my leather aside and grab the piece that I cut. So I know some people that like to glue this part on, but personally I sew it down the side and then I'll glue the top closed just a little bit. So to do this, it's pretty basic. If you've ever done sewing before, you will probably get the hang of this pretty quickly. You can also decide whether you want the shiny side of your leather to show or the rough side of your leather to show. I think I'm going to choose the rough side. I'm also going to be making a little loop for the bottom, so I'm just going to cut that out. And if you are planning on doing a loop as well, you can do it as long as you want. To do it, I'm just cutting a small, thin strip of my leather. So to begin stitching on the leather, I'm going to fold it over the stem of the feather, and I'm going to poke through the top piece on the side, only through that piece, and I'm going to tuck the tail of my thread just inside. And now I'm going to poke through both pieces of my leather. If you are using a leather needle, be careful not to poke yourself as they are very, very sharp. And I'm just going to pull it tight. So I believe that this is called a whip stitch. I could be wrong, but I'm just going to stitch it all the way down. So from now, you're just going from the bottom piece to the top piece and pulling it. Just all the way. And if you find that you have a lot more extra leather at the bottom, you can trim it up so you can take some off the side. And when you get to the bottom, if you are adding a loop, you can add that in when you get down there. So I forgot to start filming again, but basically I've just tucked the ends of the loop into the piece of leather that I have been sewing on, and now I'm going through all of the pieces with the same stitch. And it's a little bit tricky, but I'm just taking it slow. I'm going to continue this and then I'll show you what I do. Now that I've reached the bottom, I'm going to just wrap my thread around this base here a few times. And then I'm going to poke into the leather and create a knot. To secure it, and I'm just going to do another one of those. Now I'm going to kind of sew my way back up to the top. So I'm just sewing back and forth through the leather to get my thread coming eventually back up at the top. at the top, my thread is coming out basically a couple millimeters away from the top of the leather. And before I start beading, I'm just going to add a little drop of glue just at the top here to make sure that it's secure. So for this step, I'm using Gorilla Glue. You can use E6000. Just be sure not to get it on the feathers or any part of the leather that will show too much, as it does stain. So I just put a couple drops in here. I'm gonna let that cure for a minute and then I'll get on to the beading. So while the glue cures, I'm going to start scooping my beads onto my beading mat. So for the beading step, we're going to take off our leather needle and we can put that aside, and now we're going to use our beading needle. You can add that onto your thread and then we can begin the beading. So to begin, we're going to start by picking up as many beads as can make it completely around and back to the thread. I'm going to just pick up like crazy. I just start scooping my beads. I don't count them. You can bring them down your thread all the way to the feather. I'm going to wrap my thread around my finger, kind of like I'm flossing. And I'm going to basically roll this. And as you can see, that is enough beads to meet back up with the starting point. So now I'm going to just hold that down with my left hand. And for this step, we're basically going to go through the holes of all the beads that we just placed. So we're not going to be poking through the leather or anything. I'm just going to start going through the holes of those first beads. And continue that all the way around. And you don't have to poke through them all at the same time. It's going to be a little bit difficult. And then when you get back to the start, you can pull it tight, just readjust it a little bit, and it will look something like this. Now I'm going to poke through just a few more beads. I find that if I start my peyote stitch right where the beginning is, I tend to start getting a gap. So I like to sew through a couple more beads just to close that up before I start the actual peyote stitch. Now that we've done that, I'm going to grab my next color just to show you what the next step is so you can see it a bit clearer. So you're going to pick up one bead next, and if you can see, my thread is coming out from this bead right here. I'm going to not go through the next bead, but the bead after. So I'm skipping one bead and I'm going through the next bead, and then I'm tightening it, and that will make this next row of beads sort of sit in the middle. I'm going to continue that all the way around. So now my thread is coming out of this bead. I'm going to skip the next one and go through the one after that. And for all of this, I work in a clockwise direction, so I'm always going from my right to my left when I'm coming through the beads. So again, I'm picking up one more bead. I'm skipping that one and I'm going through this one and tightening it. And as you can see, the next row is forming. I'm going to continue this row and then I'll be back. So I've just finished this first row. To begin the next row, my thread is coming out of this dark blue bead. I'm going to bring it down into the light blue bead to the left and through. And now I'm going to start my next row. Now it's very simple. You're literally just putting it into the next available bead. So I'm going to do another row of the light blue. And this first couple rows, it can be a bit loose, but as you go throughout this pattern, the beads tighten up and it becomes very secure. Now I'm just poking through this bead here and tightening it. And that is basically it for the entire rest of the pattern. So you just continue those steps again and again until you get down to the bottom. So I just finished this second row of the light blue beads. So I'm going to go through this light blue bead to bring myself down to the next row, pick up my next color of bead and put it through here. And I'm just going to continue the rest of the feather. I'll come back at the end and show you how I finish. So I just wanted to pop back in. I'm almost at the end of my thread, so I figured now would be a good time to explain what to do if you're also at this part. It's actually fairly simple, so I'll just zoom in. So as you can see, my thread is coming out from this bead. I'm going to kind of weave my thread back up a few rows, and this will help secure the thread before I cut it. So I don't really have a real process for this. I just kind of go back and forth up a couple rows a few times. And then I'll maybe go over another one and up another one and back through. Maybe over again. I really just keep doing this until I think that it's secure. I'm gonna go up through one more. And now I've just taken my thread off of my needle. I'm going to cut it and then I'll show you how to add a new one. So I just cut my thread. I'm going to singe it. And now it's all disappeared. I'm going to pull out a new piece of thread and thread my needle. All right, I've threaded my needle and I'm basically gonna do the same steps that I just told you on how to tie off your old thread, but in reverse to add on a new one. So I'm going to maybe start up here and kind of weave my way back down. And when you get down to the bottom again, you want to make sure that your thread is continuing in that same clockwise direction. So as you can see, my thread is coming out on the left side of that bottom bead right there. And now you're ready to keep going. You can singe this end of your thread to be short and continue your pattern. Now that I've finished beading the entire feather, I'm going to do the same step that we did to tie off our string to finish this whole feather. Now that my thread is cut, I'm going to singe it. And now my feather is all done. And that is this tutorial all finished. I hope this was helpful for you in beading your own feather, and I can't wait to see what you create. Thanks for joining. Bye!